Has this ever happened to you? You get home from wherever you're at, you walk into your bedroom and you're putting things down in your bedroom and you hear the screeching loud sound and you're like, what was that? So you put everything down quickly and you walk into the kitchen. You walk into the kitchen and you notice a couple things. You notice the refrigerator door is open, that there's a milk trail on the floor of the kitchen, and there is a bowl on the porch with some milk in it. And your son has a baby kitten, and he has it by the neck on one hand and the back paw with the other, and he's about to dip himself into the milk so that he can get a drink of milk. As soon as he does it, the kitten, of course, doesn't want to do this, right? He scratches the boy, and the boy lets go the cat. The cat falls into the milk, and away runs, and he runs under the wood pile. Has something like that ever happened to you? Uh-oh, what happened? We had everything successful, right? He had everything he needed to have success. He had a hungry cat, had a happy boy that was willing to feed the cat. We had milk that kittens really love. So what's missing? Hi, I'm Tresta Neal, and today I'm going to tell you about why it's so important for us to teach principles to our children. I'm hoping that by the time this video ends, that you have a greater desire to know how to find and identify principles and how to apply them and how to teach it better to your children and to everybody that you know. So today we're going to discover 7 reasons why principles are important to learn, to discover, and to apply. The first reason, number 1, the first reason is because principles can be discovered, not invented. I'm going to repeat that because it sometimes gets tricky. Principles are discovered, not invented. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about this a little bit for a minute. We've got to define what a principle is and what a procedure is so that we can understand how it is to discover something and what it means to create something or to find something or to make up something. So there are 3 types of learning. The first type is concepts. The concepts are invented and they represent a group of things. So, for instance, you've heard of the concept of money, right? Or the concept, we're going to teach you the whole concept. So a concept is a group of things that the only definition of them is the description of them themselves. Okay, so if we say the concept of money, well, then I have to tell you about money. So concepts is just the group of things that are going to be talked about. Then the next one is procedures. Procedures are also invented. This is a list of things that you can do in order for something to change or a cause. It represents the knowledge of change, and it is invented. Now, the third type is the one that we're focusing on this day, and that is principles. Principles are not invented. They are discovered. Okay? They represent the knowledge of change also, but they are different from these two because they are not invented. They are discovered. And that's the biggest point here. But principles also teach us how to understand and to provide guidance on how to perform an act or how to perform a procedure. So we have concepts, a group of things, procedures, which is an invented list of things, and we have principles. So I said a concept is like the concept of money, right? But a procedure, you can think of a procedure like a recipe. I have a recipe book here, and this one's for sour cream lemon pie. And the recipe is showing us what is going to be learned or what it is. So this is the concept of lemon pie. These are the ingredients we're going to need. This is the procedure that we're going to do. We're going to turn on the oven. Then we're going to mix the ingredients. Then we're going to put it in a pie shell. You see, this is the procedure. This is how we're going to do it. The step by step. Now the procedure can be changed and the same outcome can happen. Or it can be the same, or you can do it exactly and it comes out not as beautiful. Okay? That's how you know it's invented, not discovered. And a principle is discovered. All right, so that is the three types of learning. Now, so that goes back to number one, the first reason why learning principles are so important. Now, the number two reason is that they provide an understanding of how things happen, how they happen. They also provide an understanding of why they happen the way they do. All right, let's go back to our concepts, our procedures, and our principles. In this case, let's say we're making no-bake cookies. No-bake cookies are cookies that you cook over the stove and you put on some wax paper and when they're finished. And so my children are making no-bake cookies, and they've got butter and sugar and milk, and they're stirring it together and they're boiling it for so long. Then they put the rest of the ingredients in and they put the cookies by spoonfuls onto the wax paper. But they're crumbly. They followed the recipe exactly. Why are they crumbly? They followed, the concept was to get the cookie. They wanted that, right? The procedure was followed exactly the same ingredients, the right kinds of ingredients, but they still didn't turn out. So we are missing a principle. The principle of understanding why did it turn out crumbly. Well, we know that it turned out crumbly because of the principle of if you get the temperature too high, it doesn't conform anymore. It's also, there's another principle that if you don't get it high enough, your cookies will be sticky. So those principles haven't been discovered yet. As soon as they're discovered, then we can always put a thermometer in, have it exactly the right temperature, take it off the stove, and your cookies will turn out perfect every single time because we followed that principle. Okay? I think that you're getting an understanding of how we are needing both concept, procedures, and principles in order to get a complete learning. Now, there is another way to remember this, and that's by math formulas, or this is a physics formula. You have a physics formula, which is F equals ma. Now, you may not understand what F stands for and M stands for or A stands for, right? But you can go ahead and fulfill the procedure. You can do the whole procedure, could you not? You can take F as a number and M as a number and multiply it by an A to find out what F is, right? So you can take these and fulfill them without understanding the concept and without knowing what the principle is. It's just a whole learning if you knew both. So F is force, M is mass, and A is acceleration. That's what you can understand. You can know what force is. That's the concept of knowing what force is, what mass is, and what acceleration is. You can put in the numbers, plug in the numbers, and you can compensate or compute them. But then what about the principle? If you understood the principle that as soon as anything, a force is increased, then the acceleration will increase. That is the principle, or one of the principles for this formula. And you don't have to understand that to do it. But if you did understand it, you could see that and almost predict before you compute. So this is how they work. We need all three of these in order to learn. Now, let's go on to the fourth reason why principles are so important to learn. The fourth principle. It provides guidance as to how to perform each step. It also provides guidance as to when to use which procedure or approach. Now let's go back to our kitten story at the beginning of the video. You probably came up with a story of your own that something like that has happened, right? Everything is there. Everything is being done right. You have all of the ingredients or the elements of success, but it didn't work. So you as the mother or the parent have to go in now, teach your son the principles, or give him the guidance to know how to perform and when to perform. So let's take it. How to perform. You can't dump a kitten into a milk, right? You can't. It's not going to work. But you can coax a kitten into. And as soon as he trusts you again, and as soon as he knows that it's milk that he can like, then he'll drink it on his own. The other principle is you can't hold a cat upside down. The cat loves to be petted and held, but not held upside down. So these are kinds of principles that you know and learn in, that was missing in this story. And once you have the principles behind the story, then everything happens, right? So there was a man, and he was looking at a teapot with steam coming out of it. And he thought, I wonder if I can take steam and make a steamboat. Now, does he have the procedure? No, he only has the concept, right? Once he has the concept, though, he can create procedures and do the scientific method and see if they work and see if not, until he discovers the principle. And pretty soon he did procedure after procedure after procedure, tried and tried and tried until he had a steamboat that worked. So this is why it's so important for us to teach our children to know ourselves how to identify and discover principles and how to apply them. Now, let's move on to number 6. The 6th one is principles are the only kind of content that represents truth in any significant way. Is a procedure a truth? Well, it could be, but it could be changed and still have the same outcome. So procedures really aren't real truth. See, a principle is like an element. It's broken down to its tiniest degree. And if it was broken down anymore, it would no longer be that element. But it's broken down to its tiniest degree in its simplest form, and therefore it's truth. Truths are discovered. Elements are discovered, not invented. All right, number 7, our last one. The 7th one is that we are held accountable for the principles we apply in a story, not the story itself. So let's explore that a little bit more. You've heard of the story David and Goliath, right? David was a little boy. Goliath is a big, giant man. He's ready and he's a warrior. David goes down. He's just in his tunic for being a shepherd boy, and he goes down, he picks up some stones out of the stream, and he kills Goliath. What principles did David follow that was able to kill Goliath? Obviously, there had to be some principles, right? Because logic didn't make sense, and a procedure that we knew or that they knew at that time was nowhere near. But the concept was war. We have two parties and we're going to war. How we're going to do it, or the procedure, is there's going to be a hero from one side and a hero from the other, and they're going to battle to the death, and whoever wins, wins the battle. So that was the procedure. Logic said there's no way a shepherd boy is going to beat a warrior, a tall warrior. And so he goes out, but he has the principle of, with God, all things are possible. And he believes it. And he knows that great things and small things, all things are possible. So from small things, great things can happen. And because he followed those two principles and he had God on his side, he was able to beat the warrior. This is what we're going to be held accountable. What can you do with those principles? With God, all things are possible. And from small things, great things will happen. With those two principles, what can you do in your life to apply that in your life? And how can you teach your children those principles so that they can apply them in their lives? See, we're not going to walk up to the pearly gates and say, and Heavenly Father is going to say, okay, Trusta, tell me about how tall Goliath is. Tell me how tall David was. Tell me about the distance they had to travel. How many rocks did he pick up? Okay, none of that. None of that is important. What's important is the principles that we learn from it and how we've applied them to our lives. Therefore, principles are the most important content that we can teach in all that we teach. It's the most important thing we can teach. The stories are great, the activities are great, all the things are great, but principles are the most important. And also, it is essential that we learn how to teach them well. Right? You might understand the concept a little, but do you know how to teach principles and the finding of principles, the identification principles and the application of principles really well? If not, I hope that you'll join me in the next 3 videos. We have the first video is all about what is a principle. There are 2 types of principles. We'll talk about each one of them in great detail, and then we'll talk about the characteristics of a principle. In the second video, we'll be talking about how to identify principles. There are 2 different types of principles. We'll talk about identifying each one of them and how to do that. We'll also talk about the learning levels and how important it is to know the learning levels within each principle. In the third video, we will be talking about how to apply those principles. With the 2 types of principles, there are different ways to apply principles. So we'll be talking about the 2 different ways. Well, there's actually 4 different ways on how to apply a principle. And then I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to show you how my kids have done it. I'm going to show you, give you some examples on how to do it with art, how to do it with music. And then that will be over. By the time you're done with these 3 videos, you will know how to identify, how to understand principles, and how to apply them in your life. You will also know how to teach them. You'll know how to teach identification, how to teach understanding, and how to teach application to your children. Please join me as in this quest that I have to be able to share on how important it is that we know and understand and how to teach principles. Now, I want to end with this quotation by Ezra Taft Benson. He said, "One of the most important things we can do is to immerse ourselves in the scriptures, search them diligently, feast on the words of Christ, and to learn the doctrine." And then he said the most important thing to me at this moment. He said, "Master the principles that are found therein." I served my mission in the Netherlands, and while I was there, I went out later than most girls, and I thought, hey, I know the scriptures really well, and man, I know the stories, and I know the timeline, and I've studied all this stuff, I can do this. And I get there, and my second companion comes into me, and she knows the stuff too. She knows the doctrine and everything too. But she not only knows the stories and the timelines, but she also knew the questions that were asked that led to conversion. And that threw me off. I knew in my heart that that it was true, but I didn't know the right questions to ask. Here I thought I was hot stuff, right? I thought I knew it all. And here my second companion comes in and says, no, we need to know more about the scriptures than just the stories and where they go. She taught me how to look for the questions that lead to conversion, the principles that can be applied that lead to conversion. And that is what we need to help our children. I know, and I now use that idea to help my children become converted, to help my friends become converted, to help myself be reconverted every day, is to immerse ourselves and master the principles that are therein. Thank you for joining me.